Hi, my name is Terry Sippel-Schmidt, and this is going to be a short video on CDS hooks. We're going to talk about some of the CDS basics as a refresher. We're going to talk about the general workflow of CDS hooks and how to read the website. So this is the first of several videos. First of all, what is a hook? A hook is based on the internet standard or internet specification for webhooks. A webhook is the opposite of polling. In polling, it's a recursive loop where you keep saying, did something happen? Did it happen? Did it happen? Instead, a webhook is saying, hey, something just happened. You said that you want to know about it when this happened, and it did. So now we're going to tell you. Here's the data that you requested. It's going to be an HTTPS post as opposed to a lot of fire, which is a GET. And I will send you the data to this URL endpoint, which is just like what you told me to do. You can do whatever you want with the information. Let me know what you'd like to display back to the user. That is what all that a webhook is. It doesn't really matter what the different applications are, the use cases. A webhook is just saying something happened. You told me to tell you about it. Here's the post. Here's the data. Examples of webhooks include GitHub. When someone changed the code, you're going to get a notification. A Slack webhook, when someone posts a message, you get a notification that if you sign up for it, you get a notification that someone's posted a new message in Slack. Or Stripe, which is a webhook that says someone sent a payment. Let's go back to the 5 rights of clinical decision support. All of you have gone through this, and we're going to look at it one more time. The right information, the right person, in the right format, using the right channel, at the right time. So where does CDS hooks fit into the 5 rights of clinical decision support? Really, the right time in the workflow is really the key place that a CDS hook is going to fit in, because you're going to say, hey, this happened. Therefore, I'm going to send you this information. So really, of the 5 rights, really CDS hook fits in here. However, it also fits in a couple of other places. The right information. We're going to pass some information using CDS hooks to the CDS service itself so that it can go do its job. We're even going to tell the CDS service who the person is who's using the CDS service. We might give them an actual name of an individual, or we might give them a role, such as a nurse or a physician, in the right format. The CDS service application, the server, is going to come back and give us what are called CDS cards, and they're going to tell us how to deliver that information back to the user. So this is how CDS hooks fits into the 5 rights of clinical decision support, most notably at the right time in the workflow. We also discussed how CDS decisions are made within a healthcare system. Someone has an idea for a clinician or for a particular problem or calculator they'd like to solve. It goes in through a form, there's a committee review, and then we evaluate the 5 rights. So the primary place that CDS hooks comes into play is evaluating the 5 rights and how to design the CDS intervention. So we look at the 5 rights as we're going through the build phase of a service. And then that same service is going to go through, before it's deployed, it's going to go through an approval and a rejection process, and CDS hooks doesn't really play a role there. However, there is a use case within CDS hooks called the feedback use case, and that's critical for monitoring how often feedback is accepted or rejected, and whether or not you want to continue to deploy this particular CDS service. We also discussed previously the different kinds of CDS, or the different types of CDS, being clinical decision support to provider, to a care team as part of the workflow, or to the patient. CDS hooks really applies to CDS given back to a provider. It's becoming more apparent that CDS hooks will apply to patients, and eventually it'll probably work over in the workflow as well. But right now it really started in the area of working with providers. Examples of that include alerts, best practice advisories, order sets, including medication alerts, dose calculators and other calculators, diagnostic suggestions. So this is really initially where CDS hooks began. All right, so exactly what is a CDS hook? A CDS hook is a FHIR implementation guide known as an IG. It is an HL7 approved IG. It is based on FHIR version R4. So not R5 and R6, and there's some backward compatibility for resources. The CDS hooks implementation guide is currently the published version through HL7, is currently version 2.01, also known as Standard for Trial Use, or STU2. And CDS hooks was included as part of the United States 21st Century Cures Act in 2016. So the baseline standard was included as part of the 21st Century Cures Act. The three base use cases in CDS hooks are number one, discovery. This is a pretty simplistic and it gets used once. It is basically asking the server, the CDS service, what can you do? What are you capable of? What type of cards do you return? What data do you need? The corollary that you've heard to this is the capability statement where you put a slash metadata at the end of a URL in FHIR. So basically, it's that initial query by the IT department, you getting a computable response back saying, what is this particular server capable of? That's called discovery, and that's use case one. Once you've got it set up, it's not going to be used again often. Use case two, the CDS services themselves. This is the heart and soul of CDS hooks. What is the synchronous workflow defined by the CDS hooks? So typically this is going to be a provider, maybe a patient, maybe a quality manager, but typically this is going to be a provider. And maybe the CDS service is a calculator, or it's an estimate for recurrence of a particular disease. So whatever the service is isn't defined by CDS hooks, but this is where we'll focus most of our time. The third use case that is defined in CDS hooks is the feedback loop. It's not required, it's optional. The CDS service can request feedback from the user to improve the selection and to improve the capabilities and feasibility of the clinical decision support tool itself. The intended user of the third use case is the CDS author so that they can improve the CDS intelligence. We're going to jump to the client server architecture because this is a little different from what we're used to looking at in FHIR. In FHIR, the EHR was almost always the server because we're going to the server for the data. Now it's the opposite, which is the EHR is actually the client, and you've got the physician or the nurse or any provider or care practitioner looking through the EHR through usually a patient chart for some reason. So it's an embedded CDS hook, and it's going to trigger an API. It's going to send out an HTTPS post, maybe going across the internet if it's an external or interoperable clinical decision support tool. And it's going to send that post to some CDS service or services, a series of service potentially. And they're sitting perhaps, if this is out across the internet, perhaps this is sitting out in the cloud somewhere on Azure, Google, or AWS. Or it could be on an intranet. In any case, the response is going to go back to the client, which in this case is the EHR, and they're going to display the clinical decision support response on the EHR. All right, there's two parts to the standard. There's the official standard, which is the HL7 approved standard, which is at cds-hooks, hl7.org. And there's also the community and the continuous improvement. Continuous build means that if there's changes, they're going to be noted on this webpage, which is cdshooks.org. You'll notice there's no HL7 there. We're going to talk about both of these websites, but first we're going to go take a look at the EHR itself. All right, all of you should recognize this as the educational EHR. This is the basic patient page. So when you start up the EHR, you're looking at all of your patients. We're going to go down and we're going to randomly select, let's select this one. So this is Carly. Carly is a 58-year-old female. So Carly has a list of active problems, medications, vital signs, and allergies. We're going to go ahead and some other additional information below. We're going to go ahead and open up the clinical workspace. Now, be sure to count. So it's kind of 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. Oh, okay, so that took a little while. Here's our clinical decision support that popped up as soon as we opened the patient record. And remember that, this is as soon as we opened the patient record. We have that mammography screening is overdue. The patient is female and over 50 and due for mammography screening, according to the source, which is the breast cancer screening guidelines. I can order a mammogram right here. I can just acknowledge it, or I can hit snooze so that this comes up later. We have a polypharmacy risk in this diabetic patient. This patient is on 8 separate medications for diabetes. Consider a comprehensive medication review to identify simplification and reduce drug interactions. Per the diabetes care guidelines, which is the source, we can schedule this medication review. We can link to those guidelines. We can just acknowledge this, snooze it, or just override it and ignore it. Down here we have that we are viewing a patient. We're viewing the patient who they give the name. They don't give the preferred calling name, which is interesting. Gender and date of birth. Okay, I'm going to argue at a minimum this should have been first. It should have been at the top. But perhaps it'd be nice to say what name they prefer to be called by. And do we really need to know their date of birth, or do you really need just age sufficient? Not sure. I can snooze this, I can acknowledge it. Now, the way that this has been implemented on this particular EHR is that all of these things that popped up for the patient when I opened the patient record came up in a single pane. That's probably good. It also gives me the opportunity to hit close and to immediately get out of all of the clinical decision support. I'm also going to drop down to here. So I went back to the home button and I'm going to go down to developer tools. And I can explore FHIR or I can go to Clinical Decision Support Studio. Now this is not going to be in Epic or any other EHR you have, but we have it. Here are all of the CDS services which have been integrated into our EHR using CDS hooks. Let's just look across the top here. Here's our CDS hook types. Remember these. We're going to go take a look at these again in a minute. We have patient view, medication prescribed, order select, order sign, and encounter start and discharge. The origin, which means where is the server for the clinical decision support. It can be built into the EHR. Okay, then you're probably not using CDS hooks, but maybe. External. So it could be at the CDC. It could be at the state of Maryland. It could be some CDS provider that you're going out and calling across the internet. And I'm not really sure what custom means if you want to know the truth. And then the status, active. Things that are CDS that's turned on, inactive, CDS that's turned off, and failing. That's an interesting one. Things where this clinical decision support is actually not working, the URLs are not working, as opposed to the fact that the CDS isn't working. It actually means that the integration is failing. And over here we have some success, how often it's been used in the last 24-hour period, the version of the CDS, whether or not it's active, where it's coming from. Here's the hook type. You see patient view, and here's the mammography screening reminder right here. Only this patient's had their colonoscopy on time because this one didn't pop up. And then here's the name of the CDS service. So this is what the CDS, this isn't a name that you would put on a title bar. This is a computable name for the service. All right, next up, we're going to go look at the two different websites.